Nia Carter had been cooking for the Choi household for 3 years before she knocked on Choi Sung-jae's office door at 7 in the morning and told the most dangerous man in Seoul exactly what his wife was planning to do with his life while he was gone. The Russia trip was postponed. The marriage did not survive what followed. 4 months of quiet dismantling later, Park Soo-yeon left the house. Kim Dong-wook was sent back to Korea within a week, and on the night the divorce was finalized, Sung-jae asked Nia to sit at his table for the first time in 3 years and told her she was the rarest thing he had encountered in 20 years of building an empire. Nia went home to Mapogu that night and told her daughter Zara it had been both a good day and a difficult one. Across Seoul, Park Soo-yeon had not yet made her call. She was still calculating exactly what leverage she had left, and 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, she finally decided she had found it. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, Part 1 is everything you need. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into Part 2. The household had settled into a new rhythm by the time the call came. Sung-jae still came home for dinner most nights. Not every night. His work did not permit every night, but enough nights that Mr. Kwon had quietly adjusted the household schedule to assume his presence rather than his absence. Nia noticed this the way she noticed everything, without commenting on it. The kitchen ran the same way it always had. She cooked. She managed the weekly menus with Mr. Kwon. She rode the bus to Mapogu each evening and made sure Zara's homework was checked, and David's uniform was pressed, and Emmanuel's endless questions about dinosaurs and space were answered with the specific patience of a mother who understood that a 10-year-old's curiosity was not an interruption but the entire point. Mr. Kwon, for his part, had adjusted to the new household rhythm with the specific, quiet professionalism that had made him indispensable to Sung-jae for over a decade. He said nothing about the dinner invitations that had become a nightly fixture, or about the fact that Sung-jae now asked, each morning, whether Nia had confirmed the evening's menu before he asked about anything else on his schedule. Mr. Kwon had worked in enough households to recognize a shift when he saw one, and he had worked for Sung-jae long enough to know that the correct response to noticing it was to simply keep the household running smoothly around it. The dinner invitations had continued, though neither of them called them that. Sung-jae had begun asking her to sit for a few minutes after the meal was cleared, not every night, but often enough that it had become, without either of them naming it, a kind of ritual. He asked about her children. She found herself answering more fully than she answered anyone else in the household, because he listened the way he did everything, with complete attention, and Nia had spent a lifetime being spoken to by employers who did not listen at all. Zara wants to study international relations, she told him one evening, the dishes cleared, the kitchen quiet around them. She has decided this changes every 6 months, but this time I think it might hold. What was it before international relations? Marine biology. Before that, architecture. Nia allowed herself something close to a smile. She is 16. She is allowed to still be deciding. She sounds like someone who thinks in systems, Sung-jae said. International relations, architecture, marine biology, all of them are about understanding how complicated things hold together. Nia looked at him for a moment. You have thought about this more than a man usually thinks about his cook's daughter's college major. I think about many things, more than a man in my position is usually expected to, he said. I have found it does not cost me anything to do so properly, and it costs a great deal to do it carelessly. She held his gaze a moment longer than she might have 3 weeks earlier. Something had shifted in the quality of these conversations since the night of the divorce. Not dramatically, not in any single identifiable moment, but in the accumulated weight of a dozen small evenings, where he asked and she answered, and neither of them treated the exchange as anything other than what it plainly was. She did not name what it plainly was, not yet. She had learned, across 7 years of widowhood, that naming things before you were certain of them cost more than waiting cost. David had started asking, some evenings, whether Mr. Choi would be home in time to see the model airplane he'd built for a school project. Emmanuel had taken to greeting Sung-jae by his full title, with the specific solemn formality of a 10-year-old who had decided a person mattered before he fully understood the reasons why. Nia noticed these things the way she noticed everything, in a house that depended on her noticing, quietly, completely, filing each one without comment, understanding that a household reorganizing itself around a new center of gravity did so slowly, in increments too small to name individually, but impossible to miss in their accumulation. The call came the following Tuesday morning, while Nia was at the market selecting vegetables for that evening's dinner. The market was crowded, the specific controlled chaos of a Tuesday morning when every vendor knew her by name and by preference. The fishmonger who always set aside the freshest cut for her before the morning rush claimed it. The vegetable seller who had learned, over 3 years, exactly which peppers she wanted and which she would send back without a word needing to be exchanged. She had built these relationships the same way she built everything, patiently, through consistency rather than charm, and she moved through the market that morning with the specific unhurried efficiency of a woman who had turned grocery shopping into its own small art form. It was not Park Soo-yeon's number. It was a soul number Nia did not recognize, and when she answered, a man's voice, measured, professional, entirely without warmth, introduced himself as representing a client whose name he was not yet authorized to disclose. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I understand you're employed by Choi Sung-jae." "Who is this?" Nia said, already moving toward the edge of the market stall, away from the noise. "My name is Yang Ji-sung. I'm a private consultant." A pause, deliberate. "I'd like to discuss your visa status." Nia went very still. Around her, the market continued its ordinary Tuesday rhythm. A vendor calling out the morning's prices, a delivery cart navigating the narrow aisle between stalls, the specific ordinary noise of a life continuing around a woman whose entire foundation had just been quietly informed that it might not be as solid as she had believed. Still here? Good, because what Yang Ji-sung actually wants is not what anyone in that house is prepared for. Subscribe and hit the bell. Let's keep going. She had lived in Korea for 12 years on a series of work visas tied, for the last 3, to her employment with the Choi household. It was not a secret. It was simply not something that came up in conversation. The specific, quiet vulnerability of a woman who had built an entire life in a country where her right to remain in it depended on a piece of paper that could, with the right pressure applied in the right places, become considerably more complicated than it currently was. She had thought, across 12 years, that she had made her peace with this vulnerability, had filed it alongside the other specific vulnerabilities of an immigrant life, the ones you learn to carry without letting them show in your posture, because letting them show invited exactly the kind of person who was now on the other end of this phone call. "My visa status is in order," Nia said, her voice even despite the specific coldness moving through her chest. "I'm sure it is," Yang said. "I'm equally sure that a sufficiently thorough review of any long-term work visa can surface irregularities that were never intended as violations, but could, in the wrong administrative hands, be characterized that way. Processing delays, paperwork discrepancies from years ago, the kind of thing that takes months to resolve, during which employment status becomes complicated." "Say what you're actually calling to say," Nia said. "My client would like a conversation," Yang said. "Somewhere private. She believes you, and she have overlapping interests that could resolve this more efficiently than an immigration review would. Your client is Park Soo-yeon." Yang did not confirm it. He also did not deny it, which Nia understood, in the specific language of people who spoke carefully for a living, as its own kind of confirmation. "I'll expect your call within the week," Yang said, and ended the line. Nia stood in the market for a long moment, the vegetables still in her basket, her hands, she checked, deliberately, the way she had trained herself to check since the morning Marcus's notification came. Steady. The fishmonger, noticing her stillness from 3 stalls away, called out to ask if everything was all right. Nia nodded, managed something close to her usual smile, and finished her shopping with the specific discipline of a woman who had learned, across a difficult life, that the work did not pause simply because the ground beneath it had shifted. She did not call Sung-jae immediately. She finished the shopping. She rode the bus back to Hanamdong, the specific familiar route she had taken thousands of times, watching the city move past the window, and thinking, with the methodical patience she brought to everything, about what she actually knew and what she was only guessing at. She prepared the evening's dinner with the same complete attention she gave every dinner, because the one thing she had learned across a lifetime of difficulty was that the work did not stop simply because the day had become harder, and stopping the work was the first step toward believing you could not do it. She told him after dinner. In the kitchen, the door closed. He listened without interrupting, the same way he had listened 7 months ago when she came to his office at 7 in the morning. When she finished, his expression had gone through a transformation Nia had seen only once before. The same cold, precise stillness from the night she had described the third phone and the property transfer documents. "She's threatening your immigration status," he said. "She's threatening my children's stability," Nia said. "That is the accurate way to say it. My visa is a piece of paper. My children's lives in the only city they remember is what actually sits behind it." "This ends today," Sung-jae said. "No," Nia said, and the firmness in her own voice surprised her slightly. "It does not end today, because if you make one call and solve this for me, the way you solve everything, I will spend the rest of my time in this household wondering whether I am safe because of what I am worth, or because of what you have decided to protect. I need to understand what she actually wants first, the same way I needed 2 weeks before I came to your office. I am not going to abandon that method now, because the stakes are mine instead of yours." He studied her for a long moment. Something in his expression, not quite surprise, closer to the specific recalibration of a man encountering, again, exactly the quality in her that had first made him listen 7 months ago. "You understand what you're asking," he said. "You're asking me to watch someone threaten your children's stability and do nothing immediately, because you need to preserve something about how this gets solved. I'm asking you to trust that I know how to handle difficult people," Nia said. "I have been handling difficult people my entire life. This is not a new category for me. It is only a new setting. I have negotiated with landlords who wanted to raise rent past what a widow's income could bear. I have negotiated with a school administration that tried to place David in a program he did not need, because it was administratively convenient for them. I know how to hold my ground with people who believe their position gives them the advantage. I only need the time to understand what advantage Park Soo-yeon actually believes she has, before I decide how to take it from her." "All right," he said, "but you do not do this alone. Whatever conversation happens, I am in the room, or Mr. Kwon is, or someone is. That is not a request." Nia held his gaze. "I can accept that," she said. "We are right in the middle of something that could cost Nia everything she has spent 12 years building. Subscribe and stay close. You do not want to miss where this goes. Let's keep going." The meeting happened 4 days later, in a private meeting room at a hotel Sung-jae's people had selected, Mr. Kwon standing near the door, and Sung-jae seated beside Nia rather than staying away. A detail Nia noted the way she noted everything, understanding it as its own kind of statement. The 4 days between the phone call and the meeting had not been idle ones. Nia had spent them the way she spent most difficult things, methodically, without rushing toward a conclusion before the evidence supported it. She had gone, on her own initiative, to the immigration office where her visa had originally been processed, and had requested a full copy of her file, discovering exactly what she suspected she would discover. Nothing irregular, nothing that a competent lawyer couldn't dispatch within a single phone call. She had also spent an evening with Zara, explaining as much of the situation as a 16-year-old needed to understand, because she had decided, somewhere in those 4 days, that shielding her daughter from difficulty had never actually served either of them as well as preparing her for it. Park Soo-yeon arrived with Young Ji-sung a step behind her. She had aged in the 3 weeks since Nia had last seen her from the far side of a dining room she no longer occupied, in the specific way that people age when they have spent every recent hour recalculating a life that had not gone according to plan. Her clothes were still expensive, still precisely chosen, but there was a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago, the particular strain of someone whose confidence had been built on a foundation that had turned out to be considerably less stable than she'd believed. "Ms. Carter," Soo-yeon said, sitting without being invited to. You've done quite well for yourself. Cook to confidant in record time. I told your husband the truth about what you were planning to do, Nia said. I don't consider that doing well for myself. I consider it doing my job, as a person who saw something wrong and said so. How noble, Soo-yeon said. Let's dispense with the performance. You know why I'm here. Tell me anyway, Nia said. I find it useful to hear things stated plainly, rather than guessed at. Soo-yeon's eyes flicked to Sung-jae, then back to Nia, something calculating moving behind them. I lost a great deal because of what you told him. Money I was owed, a settlement that should have been considerably larger, structured around assets that mysteriously became harder to access the moment you opened your mouth. She leaned forward slightly. I want that corrected. A payment, structured however Thompson's counterpart wants to structure it, in exchange for my discretion about your visa irregularities and my silence going forward. There are no irregularities, Sung-jae said, the first thing he had said since sitting down. Ms. Carter's visa has been reviewed by my own counsel this week. It is completely in order. I would add that Ms. Carter went to the immigration office herself before this meeting and requested her own file, because she does not wait for other people to establish facts she can establish for herself. Something flickered across Yang Ji-sung's face, the specific expression of a man whose leverage had just evaporated in real time, replaced by the particular unease of a professional realizing he had built a strategy on a foundation his own client had not bothered to verify. Then I'll find something else, Soo-yeon said, her composure cracking slightly at the edges. You could, Nia said, before Sung-jae could answer. Or you could consider what you're actually asking for right now, which is money from a marriage you already lost fairly, obtained through threatening a widow's ability to raise her children in the only home they remember. I would like you to sit with that description for a moment, before you decide it's the version of yourself you want to be. The room was quiet. You don't get to lecture me about who I am, Soo-yeon said, but the sharpness had gone out of it. I'm not lecturing you, Nia said. I'm telling you what I saw, the same way I told your husband what I saw 7 months ago. I don't do it to hurt people. I do it because someone has to say the true thing out loud, and I have found, across a difficult life, that I would rather be the one who says it than the one who stayed silent and lived with what that silence cost. Soo-yeon looked at her for a long moment. Something behind her eyes shifted, not quite softening, but losing some of its original certainty. You really believe that, she said, that saying the true thing matters more than protecting yourself. I've buried a husband who believed exactly that, Nia said. I have raised 3 children on the specific inheritance of that belief. I am not going to abandon it now, because it has become inconvenient for you. Get out, Sung-jae said quietly, to Yang Ji-sung. Both of you, if there is a legitimate financial claim from the settlement, have your counsel bring it to Thompson's office properly. This, he gestured at the room, at the specific attempt that had brought them there, ends now. Soo-yeon stood. She looked at Nia one final time, not with warmth, but with something that might, in a different life, have resembled respect. You're very sure of yourself for a cook, she said. I'm very sure of what's true, Nia said. That's a different thing. Soo-yeon left. Yang followed her out without another word, and Mr. Kwon closed the door behind them with the specific quiet finality of a man who had spent 14 years managing exactly this kind of moment. The recap you already know says Nia does the right thing even when it costs her. What it costs her tonight is going to test that completely. Subscribe and hit the bell. Part 3 is already forming. Let's keep going. Mr. Kwon confirmed within the week that Soo-yeon's legal team had quietly withdrawn the threatened complaint, apparently satisfied, or perhaps simply exhausted, by the reality that no leverage remained to be found. Sung-jae's counsel monitored the situation for a month afterward. Nothing further surfaced. Nia did not celebrate. She had learned, across a lifetime of difficulty, that the absence of an immediate threat was not the same thing as safety, and she continued watching the way she watched everything, without announcing it, without making it anyone's business but her own. She kept a copy of her immigration file in a folder at the bottom of her closet in Mapogu, not because she expected to need it again, but because she had learned that preparation was cheaper than regret, and she intended to teach her children the same lesson eventually, when they were old enough to carry it without it becoming a burden instead of a tool. She told Zara about the visa threat 2 weeks later, at their kitchen table in Mapogu, because she had decided, somewhere in the 4 days between the phone call and the meeting, that her daughter deserved the truth, rather than a version softened for her comfort. Zara listened the way she listened to everything, completely, without interrupting. "You could have lost your job," Zara said finally. "Our whole life here." "I could have," Nia said. "I didn't. Because Mr. Choi protected you. Because I told the truth, and refused to be moved by threats designed to make me abandon it," Nia said. "Mr. Choi stood beside me. He did not do it for me. There's a difference, and I want you to understand it, because someday, someone is going to threaten something that matters to you, and I need you to know that the person standing beside you is not the same thing as the reason you stood your ground in the first place." Zara considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. "Do you love him?" The kitchen was quiet. "I don't know yet," Nia said. "Honestly, I know that I trust him. I know that he listens to me the way almost nobody in my life has listened to me since your father died. I know that whatever this is, I am not going to name it before I am certain, because naming things too early has cost me more than waiting ever has. Your father used to say the same thing about decisions that mattered, that the ones worth making were worth making slowly." Zara nodded, the specific nod of a daughter who understood that both was sometimes the most honest answer a mother could give. She reached across the table and, without saying anything further, squeezed her mother's hand once, the way she had done since she was 9 years old and had first learned that some things required presence rather than words. Sung-jae found Nia in the kitchen the following evening. After dinner, the dishes cleared, David and Emmanuel's laughter still audible from the sitting room, where they'd taken to doing homework some evenings now, at Sung-jae's invitation, in a house that had quietly, without either adult naming it, begun absorbing all 3 of Nia's children into its rhythm. "I heard what Zara asked you," he said. Nia looked up. "You were listening." "I was in the hallway. I did not mean to overhear it. I did not walk away once I had." She studied him for a moment. "And what did you think of my answer?" "I think it was honest," he said, "which is the only kind of answer I have ever wanted from you." He was quiet for a moment. "I would like to tell you something, and I do not need you to answer it tonight, or this week, or on any timeline other than the one that is actually yours." Nia waited. "7 months ago you knocked on my door and told me the truth about my own house, because you could not live with the alternative," Sung-jae said. "Every day since then, you have continued telling me the truth. About your daughter's ambitions, about your fear for your children, about a woman who tried to threaten your right to remain in the only country your family has left. I have built an empire on reading people accurately. I have never once, in 20 years, met someone whose truth I trusted as completely as I trust yours." He held her gaze. "I am not asking you to name anything tonight. I am telling you that when you are ready, I will already know what I feel, and I will not have changed my mind." Nia was quiet for a long moment, weighing the specific weight of what he'd just said against everything she had learned, across a difficult life, about the cost of moving too quickly toward things that felt this good. "Marcus used to say something similar," she said finally. "Not in those words. He would say that a person shows you who they are through what they do, when nothing is being asked of them yet. You have been doing that for 7 months. Dinner invitations that cost you nothing to extend, and cost you something to keep extending once the marriage that used to explain them was gone. Questions about my children that you did not have to ask. A room you insisted on being in, even after I told you I could handle Park Soo-yeon on my own." She looked at him steadily. "I noticed all of it. I was not choosing not to name it. I was choosing to be certain first, because I have exactly one heart left after everything the last 7 years have taken from it, and I was not going to spend it carelessly." "And now?" Sung-jae said, quietly. "Now I am closer to certain than I have been in 7 years, Nia said. "That is not the same as saying it out loud tonight, but I wanted you to know the distance has gotten considerably smaller than it was." Something moved across his face. Not triumph, nothing so simple. The specific quiet relief of a man who had waited 7 months without once demanding to know where he stood, and who understood in that moment that the waiting had been its own kind of answer. He had spent 20 years building an organization on the principle that patience produced better outcomes than urgency ever could. He had not expected to need that same principle in his own kitchen, with a woman who cooked his meals and had, somewhere along the way, become the person whose opinion of him mattered more than anyone else's in Seoul. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not asking me to be certain before I am." "You taught me that patience," he said. "I am only returning it." That is where part 2 ends. Park Soo-yeon's threat is closed, for now. Nia's children are safe, for now. Choi Sung-jae has said, without quite saying it, exactly what he feels. Part 3 is coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, do you think Nia is ready to name what this is, or is she still waiting for one more sign? I read every single one. Don't go anywhere.